To Sparks of History, where world history and Jewish history meet. We are very, very pleased to have with us today Professor Nicolas McDowell, who is the Professor of Early Modern Literature and Thought at the University of Exeter. Professor McDowell's research focuses on the literary, cultural, and intellectual history of the period of 1500 to 1750, with particular focus on the civil wars of the 17th century. He is the author of The English Radical Imagination, Cultural Religion Revolution, 1630 to 1660, as well as Poetry and Allegiance in the English Civil Wars, Marvell and the Cause of Wit. Professor McDowell is also the co-editor of the Oxford Handbook on Milton. And today we will be discussing Professor McDowell's award-winning Poet of Revolution, The Making of John Milton, deeply researched. As you can see, it's quite a comprehensive and lengthy book, very enjoyable. I purchased it online at Amazon. You just go on to Amazon, Poet of Revolution, The Making of John Milton. Professor McDowell, just to begin, a little bit about your background and how you became interested in John Milton.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, sorry, I just cut out there for a second. But yeah, well, thanks. I grew up in Belfast in Northern Ireland during the 70s and 80s, early 90s, during the so-called Troubles in Northern Ireland. And that gave me a very strong sense of the issues of religious and political conflict, growing up in a sort of almost a semi-civil war situation, a kind of low-level civil war situation at times. So I've always had a great interest in the idea of civil war and about the cultural manifestations, I suppose, of religious and political conflict. Now, that when I studied at Cambridge as an undergraduate English, and I read Milton's Paradise Lost there. I was kind of, blown away by what a great poem it was, but I had very little sense of the context in which it was written. We just really read it for, its beauty as poetry. And then when I went to study for my master's at Oxford, I was introduced by a great tutor there, Nigel Smith, to Milton's prose works, which I never really knew existed. And suddenly I realized that Milton himself had been writing in the midst of a civil war in England, in a time of religious and political conflict. And a lot of his work can be placed in that context. A lot of his poetry also derives from that sense of conflict that he lived through in the English Civil War. And that's really why I think I've become Poet of Revolution is a book that tries to, if you like, do both things, which is try to appreciate Milton as a poet, as a literary figure, but place the writing of the poetry within the detailed context of the traumatic and really quite major political events that he lived through in his own lifetime.